Ooh, yeah. Okay, we're about to talk about the bureaucracy. This is kind of like interest groups. It's one of those things that's super, super important. You would not get this information anywhere else. I can't think of another class where you would see this compilation of information, but it is not the sexiest information. I am going to make my way through it. I am going to try to make it as interesting as possible, and I'm probably going to do that by talking about scandals and telling stories. That's the way we're going to make our way through this. So we're going to first start talking about the members of the of the executive branch that are elected. So now this is E.J. Davis's fault. E.J. Davis was able to pick his own cabinet. The United States is able to pick his own. He gets to decide who all of the leaders of the departments are going to be, his attorney general, so on and so forth. But E.J. Davis, they felt abused this power, and this power was taken away from the governor. And this is true of a lot of southern states. A lot of southern states are set up this way where they actually have the most important positions elected separately from the governor. They run in their own elections and could theoretically be a different party from the governor. And in some states, that is exactly, they'll have um, a, a Democratic lieutenant governor and a Republican governor, or the other way around, and it leads to all kinds of interesting things. So we're going to start with the lieutenant governor. We're real familiar with the lieutenant governor because the primary job of the lieutenant governor is to work in the legislative branch. So we talked about the legislative branch and the tremendous power that the lieutenant governor wields in chapter 7. But the lieutenant governor is actually and technically like the vice president is. So it is as a part of the executive branch. If the governor leaves the state temporarily, or if the governor resigns or gets impeached or passes away, the lieutenant governor goes into that spot automatically. And the lieutenant governor serves as the chair, and there's some Latin. Ex officio just means because of the office. Because he is lieutenant governor, he is the chair of several boards and commissions: legislative budget board, legislative council, and one real big one that's going to be coming up next year is the legislative redistricting board, because we just had a census. So redistricting board does the redistricting if Congress doesn't get around to it, and I suspect they will not. Then there is the Attorney General. This is the chief legal officer for the state. Oh, by the way, our Lieutenant Governor is a guy named Dan Patrick. Our Attorney General is a guy named Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton, here I go with the gossip. Ken Paxton is under indictment. Ken Paxton just had a big letter that came out from members of his office. Quite a few people resigned and said that he has been misusing money and abusing power as Attorney General, but yet and still, he is still our Attorney General. He barely beat the Democrat last go round because he was under indictment when he ran for Attorney General, but he's there. Um, so the job of the Attorney General is to interpret the Constitution. The Attorney General also issues legal opinions about application of state law. The Attorney General represents the state in civil and criminal litigation, so really has nothing to do with criminal like anything that has to do with the criminal law as it applies to the people of the state of Texas. But if the state is filing criminal charges, then the Attorney General's office is going to represent the state. And the Attorney General will review any law or application of the law and issue what is called an Attorney General's opinion. And we treat, until there is a court case or a new law is passed, we treat the Attorney General's opinion on how this law should be applied just like law. They're cited in court cases all the time. The Attorney General's office does, if you go to that website, they do child support enforcement. They do antitrust law. And so there are local Attorney General's offices all over the state. And when John Cornyn, he's now a senator, when John Cornyn was Attorney General, they instated a rule that said that if a person is getting any kind of assistance from the state, anything, unemployment, WIC, Medicare, food stamps, now called SNAP, that the Attorney General's office was going to intervene and make sure that there was not somebody that was supposed to pay child support. So they automatically file a child support paternity claim if there is not one already in place, to try to offset some of the money that a person is going to get by collecting child support. So they are very active. And I know in Tarrant County, the Attorney General's office intervenes on any child support case. So if there is a divorce or that comes from family court, the Attorney General's office will monitor the child support order for the rest of the time that the child is under 18. So they are a super, super busy department within the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office has almost 4,000 employees. Then we have I think you pronounce this controller, y'all. Honestly, it's supposed to be controller. But where this is Texas, we call it the comptroller. The comptroller of public accounts. This is the chief financial officer. And when I say chief financial officer, the comptroller certifies how much money the state has to spend, puts money aside. We have something that's called the rainy day fund. And so of all the money that we collect, a certain percentage of it gets socked away, so that if we ever have a budget shortfall or have an emergency, we have that money saved there. And I suspect that they're going to be dipping into the rainy day fund this go round. I know that they told all community colleges that they needed to cut their budgets by 5% after we had the COVID outbreak. So we're expecting heavy cuts across the board. The one thing that is required of the state of Texas, this is in the Texas Constitution, is that we have to balance our budget. We have to balance our budget. So we can't borrow money, we can't spend more money than we have. Only in an emergency, upon approval of 4/5 of both the House and Senate, can the state of Texas borrow money. We have never done it. Never done it. We get in there, we balance that budget. When we have budget shortfalls, they pass legislation and dip into the rainy day fund. The comptroller also looks at any appropriations bill and says, yeah, we have enough money for that. So certifies any bill that comes across out of the legislature that has to do with money and says, yep, if this bill gets passed, then we have enough money in our budget to pay for that. The comptroller also keeps, how do I say it? Escheat, ESCHEAT. Basically, if somebody has some money that they know belongs to someone else, instead of just holding on to it for years, they send it to the comptroller's office so that they can get it off their books. They don't have to worry about it anymore, and the comptroller holds it. And if a person applies for it, and can verify that they are the person that owned that money, then the comptroller's office will send that money to you. Y'all, go to the Texas comptroller's office, um, or just type in state money held by state, put in your name, and make sure that they're not holding your money. Banks that close a bank account because you never came back and you put some money in there. Utility companies that required a deposit and you never got it, you moved. Um, um, what am I trying to say? Like apartments that houses that you rent and you put down a utility deposit, or you put down a deposit and never got it back. I remember I have always gone and looked and put my name in. I had some money because I had done some work for the county, some court appointment work, and then I closed my office and shut down my post office box. So the post office, of course, sent the check back to them. And so they ended up sending it to the comptroller's office. So I had some money that was sitting there. I always have at least one student that finds that there's some money. There was, I think it was oil and gas. It was a gas lease that the young man's father never agreed to, but they were able to get the lease done anyway. So there was some money that was coming to them, and so it was like $4,000. So go check the comptroller's website and make sure that there's not some money in your name or your family's name, um, because that's where it is. Fill out the form, get your money. Oh, another elected position in Texas is the agriculture commissioner. And our agriculture commissioner is a guy named Sid Miller, always wears a cowboy hat and always in some kind of controversial trouble, just always saying stuff that he's not supposed to. Uh, Sent out a tweet from the official agriculture commission website about Hillary Clinton calling her a bad name. He's just always in something. But their job, there is a requirement that the commissioner of agriculture be a farmer. I guess you just have to say it. I don't think that they go and check. That person is in charge of promoting the agriculture in the state, licenses, and is in charge of, what am I trying to say? Pesticides and investigating pesticides that have to do with agriculture. So they regulate the agriculture industry. They also take complaints against the agriculture industry. So sometimes people say that sometimes people say that the agriculture commissioner has a conflict of interest, because how do you represent people and take complaints? Land commissioner. Our land commissioner is one George P. Bush. If that sounds familiar, it should. He is the nephew of George W. Bush and the grandson of George H.W. Bush. He is an attorney that grew up in Florida, and he is his mother. If you've ever seen George, if you've ever seen Jeb Bush, Jeb Bush ran for president on the Republican ticket, and but if you've never seen his wife is of Mexican descent. She is super pretty, and George P. Bush got all of his mom's genes. You can tell that he's a Bush, but he's a looker. Go look up George P. Bush, our land commissioner. And so what the land commissioner does is manages rentals and leases of state-owned land, and the state of Texas owns a lot of land. And some of those the oil and gas companies have leases on, and so that is another source of revenue for the state. And the land commissioner also regulates the Veterans Land Board, and so gives low interest loans for land to veterans in the state of Texas. I'm telling you, he's cute. Let's talk about appointed executives. So these are people that are not elected. They are appointed by the governor. So this is a list of people that are appointed directly by the governor. Of course, any of these people have to be approved by the Senate. So one of them is the Secretary of State. A lot of states elect their secretaries of state, but not Texas. Secretary of State is in charge of elections. So right now, the Secretary of State's office is on 100 because they are moving very fast. They manage the voter registration rolls. They work very closely with counties. They fund elections. And so on the Secretary of State's website, you can go to see if you're registered to vote. You can go to see what precinct you're in. If there's any issues with your voter registration, the Secretary of State's website will house all of that information. Secretary of State is also in charge of all business licenses. So if you are going to incorporate or form a limited partnership, you pay your fees and get your articles of incorporation or limited partnership papers from the Secretary of State's office. Adjutant General, we talked about earlier, is the head of the military, and that person of the state military, state National Guard, and the National Guard and the State Guard, and that Adjutant General is appointed to 2-year terms. Secretary of State is 4. The Adjutant General is appointed to 2-year terms directly by the governor. The governor also appoints the commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services. Department of Health and Human Services is a huge department in the state of Texas because they administer, not only do they administer any food related or health related entitlement programs like Medicaid and SNAP. They also are in charge of any health services. So MHMR, Child Protective Services, or I think they call it Department of Protective Services now. It used to be CPS. Any state-run care facilities and our state mental hospitals are all under the Department of Health and Human Services. Then there's the insurance commissioner. I don't know what the insurance commissioner does anymore. I don't know. But their job used to be to regulate insurance rates and determine whether or not insurance companies could raise their rates through a hearing process. They have really taken away a lot of the teeth of the insurance commissioner. Basically, their job is to make sure that insurance companies are solvent. So insurance companies have to file bonds, and the bond insures all the money. Like if everybody that they insured filed a claim at the same time, would they have enough money to pay all the claims? So the insurance commissioner is basically holds the bonds for insurance companies around the state and gives licenses to perform in the state. Then there's the Commissioner of Education, and works very closely with the Texas Education Administration, and that person is appointed by the governor. So these are not boards, these are executives that are appointed by the governor. Then there are boards and commissions. Some of them are elected, some of them are appointed. On the ballot this year, there is, they stagger these. There's one Texas Railroad Commission position open. Now, plain reading of that, you would assume that the Texas Railroad Commission regulates railroads, but you would be wrong. You would be wrong. The Texas Railroad Commission does not regulate railroads. The Texas Railroad Commission regulates pipelines. I don't know. Don't ask me. So they give natural gas leases. They give permission to gas companies if they are trying to sign a lease and somebody won't sign, to go ahead and put the gas lines down, and they inspect gas lines around the state or not. Because you remember, it's been about 6-7 years ago now, we had some explosions because the company had installed some bad valves that were not giving release, and so gas was building up in pipes, and one person passed away. The Railroad Commission's job was to inspect these pipelines, and they never noticed, so apparently they were not inspecting. The State Board of Education, they divide the state up into, I think, 9 regions, and they elect the Board of Education to make decisions about textbooks, school policy, the big stuff about the education about the education system in the state of Texas, the stuff that is united. Although we have independent school districts, so each of the school districts in Texas has an elected board. Then there are appointed boards. One of them is the TCEQ, the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality. Environmental quality has never been a big priority in the state of Texas. The TCEQ shows up when something bad happens, but they're supposed to enforce environmental regulation. They are supposed to work with the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency on the national level, but usually they say everything is fine until there's an explosion, like the one that was in West Texas, and there was one in Italy or somewhere down there on 35. There was an explosion. So then the TCEQ shows up and goes, "We're gonna fix it. Don't worry about it." I'm gonna leave it alone. Then there are boards that the elected officials run. Texas Bond Review Board is one. The Gaming Commission is another. I told you guys about the Veterans Land Board that is run by the Land Commissioner, George P. Bush. So there are several boards that are run by the comptroller, the attorney general, the land commissioner, or the agriculture commissioner, because it goes along with their office. The bureaucracy. You would be floored if you saw the size of Texas government. We pride ourselves on being um, fiscally responsible, but and running tight budgets and always balancing our budget, but there are still quite a few things that have to get done, and the size of the people that work for these boards and commissions and work for these elected officials and elected board members has increased dramatically. Texas government is getting to be on the large side. There has been a push to privatize some of this work, um, and to just give it to companies and pay a contract so that Texas doesn't have to directly oversee it. This concept has gotten a lot of support from conservatives. But the one big problem with privatization is there is always potential for corruption, because who's going to get those contracts? Your friends, the people that gave you late term contributions, the companies that you work for when you're not at the Texas legislature for that 140 days. So there is always the potential for corruption when you turn over the process of running huge government programs to private companies. This is still true of the state of Texas. Bureaucracies have hierarchy. There are the people at the top, and then there are the people that are deputies to them, and then there are the people that work in the field offices. And if you work in the Fort Worth field office of the Child Support Division of the Attorney General's office, you are never going to meet Ken Paxton. You would not file a complaint with Ken Paxton. So there are levels, and there's always a process to addressing and speaking with people. So Texas follows this pattern where in a bureaucracy there's levels, and it takes a long time to get something done if you don't go to the right person. In Texas, we do not have statewide civil service. So I mean, what that means is that you have to qualify. You have to meet certain qualifications to be able to hold certain offices. If it's an office, or to hold certain jobs. If it's a job typing, then you have to be able to type a certain amount of words per minute. You apply for a federal job, they're going to be giving you some type of test. And so there are qualifications. You have to meet the qualifications. Texas does not do this. Texas relies on patronage. Texas relies on people being able to get positions. And usually, I remember when I graduated from law school, and I kept applying for jobs, on the state level, and they were just telling me no, 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 no. And it's because I didn't know anybody. I hadn't worked on anybody's campaign. I didn't know the governor. I was not in. And so in a system where friends and friends of friends are the ones that get these jobs, and it's a who you know type deal, then it's not necessarily very neutral. Now, that's not to say that everybody that is working for every department in the state knows the governor, but there is a great deal of patronage. For a short period of time, I could not stand that job. I worked for Children's Medicaid, and it was because my sister-in-law was a supervisor, and I needed a job real quick. And so she was like, well, why don't you go and apply for this job? And lo and behold, I got it real quickly, um, and trained in the office that she was in. So that's just an example. Um, there have been a lot of attempts to try to depoliticize the independent board and commission system, just to try to get people that are qualified and that are knowledgeable about that particular job, and that are not beholden to the industry that they regulate into those jobs. Local governments don't use nonpartisan elections. They don't even look at what party people are from. A lot of times you can guess. You can look at some of the other work they do. But it is much better if you have expertise. Usually you develop that expertise by working in the job for an extended period of time. One of the issues, basically, if you were looking at these boards and commissions, you look at what their name is and you can tell who they regulate. So say it is the board of nurse examiners. There's an example. You know that their clientele group is going to be nurses and people that are applying to be nurses. The Texas Bar Association, their clientele group are attorneys and people applying to be attorneys. They regulate them. They have license fees. They collect the license fees, and they do enforcement if there are complaints. So the clientele groups are always wanting the agencies to go light on them. So what they do is try to make sure that the people that are in high positions within these agencies came from the agency and are friendly. So we see a lot of revolving door. We see a lot of, I don't see why we need to do that. That's Bobby, and Bobby wouldn't do that. A lot of lack of regulation between the boards and the clientele because they're all friends. They all usually are on the same page, and we just don't have a high regulatory environment in the state. So whether or not the agencies need support depends on the government's formal and informal powers. Many of these boards and commissions depend on the governor to appoint them. So they will lobby the governor's office to get people that they want in. Now, for example, Rick Perry had a lot of power because he kept getting reelected. At some point, everybody that was in the bureaucracy was somebody that he had appointed or had been hired by someone that he had appointed. And he got to the point, when you watch Death by Fire, you will see that there were all kinds of little instances where he was silencing people, and he had his hand in the process because he had a lot of power. That is kind of unusual. He got into some serious trouble. Rick Perry, when he was governor, got into some serious trouble. In fact, was indicted because he got mad at someone that was over a commission that he had not appointed. And he tried to fire her, but he couldn't fire her because she had been appointed prior to him coming in. He tried to get her to resign. Then she got arrested, or at least she was pulled into Austin Police Department. She was from Austin, and she was pulled over for driving while intoxicated. And they took a video of her, they publicized the video of her, and the evidence did not look good. So Rick Perry tried to get her to resign, and she would not do it. And they had been going back and forth. And so, just like Paul Ferguson had done, when the budget came to his desk, he eliminated the budget for the commission that she was the head of, still in an attempt to get her out of that office. And so he was indicted for abuse of power. But really, if you think about it, there's not any law or any thing in the Constitution that says that you can't do that. It doesn't say you can't. I mean, it specifically gives the governor the power of a line item veto, and it doesn't say that you can't do that. So he didn't get impeached like Paul Ferguson. All right, let's talk about the Iron Star. So we talked about, when we were talking about interest groups, we talked about the Iron Triangle. The Iron Star involves quite a few more people. But still, it is iron. Still, all of these people are actors on the state level. Still, we the people are left out of the conversation as public policy gets set, as rules get set, as enforcement is meted out. So interest groups, the leaders of the legislature, including the committee chairman, the governor, the administrators, and the boards and commissions that are elected and appointed, all work together to get public policy done and to get public policy enforced. Still leaves out the constituents. It still leaves out the people. So the legislature decides what the boards and commissions can do. They pass laws. They decide how much money they get. And the members of the agencies work with the legislature to make sure that they get the right amount of money. They try to find allies that will support them. Interest groups will lobby the members of the legislature, and they'll lobby the members of the agencies to get the things that they want. They will also wine and dine and donate money, do whatever they need to do. And the agencies also are in charge of law enforcement, administrative law enforcement, and administrative review of any impropriety that goes on within their clientele group. There are a few laws that have been passed to try to make this a little bit more open, and I'm going to tell you about two of them. One of them is the Open Meetings Act. The members of the legislature and the members of the bureaucracy cannot have meetings that is about official government business that is closed to the public. They have to, really, any governmental entity, they also can't do it for local government, for county government. You have to post that you're having the meeting. You have to post the agenda. You have to talk about the stuff that's on the agenda, and if you are going to have a meeting that is not open to the public, you have to explain why. We also have in Texas the Open Records Act. Any person can go and file, even for the things that are not done in open meetings, can go and file for governmental records. We want a record of that closed meeting. We want to know what was discussed, and the government, whether it be city, county, or state, is not allowed to not turn over. That's a double negative. They are required to turn over whatever the request is. There are also whistleblower laws in the state of Texas that allow, give protection to members, people that work for agencies or work with agencies, to say when there are issues or when there are problems or when there is corruption, and the law technically gives them protection for their job. But you can imagine that it would be hard to be the person that said, yeah, they're over here stealing, for that person to stay in their job. We have in all of the agencies an ombudsman. That person takes complaints from the public and mediates complaints from the public and determines whether or not um, they are valid, and issues reports. So there are tools that are available that give the government some accountability to the people. We don't know about them. How likely are we to file a complaint because Burleson City Council said that they were having a city council meeting and then they did it, or Arlington City Council said that they were having a meeting but they went into private session for an hour, both of which are quite common. But I mean, we're not going to those meetings, we're not watching those meetings, so a lot of times we don't know. How likely are you to go to hear a testimony at a Senate hearing? And so they give us notice. For the most part, we are very busy going about our day and don't realize it. All right, that is the end. I did 2 different lectures, one of them about the governor and one of them about the bureaucracy and the appointed and elected officials and boards and commissions. And all of this will be on the quiz next week. The quiz, whenever it is.